All right, so this is the next step in our educational process. And this school, we started with talking about profitability and what drives it in ranching, or are we really doing grass farming? You know, Alan's the one who really popularized that term and pushed it, that we need to shift our mindset from that we're cattlemen or sheep producers to we're grass farmers. And then fundamentally what grass farming really means is we are solar energy converters to meat, milk, and fiber. So there's people here from the East Coast, from the Western, the mountain region, from the South, Texas, Mississippi, and from Iowa now, so kind of heart of the Corn Belt country. We come from a diverse background. So do you call your operation a ranch? Is it a farm? Is it specifically a grass farm? So we're going to look at some underlying principles that drive profitability in the grass farming / ranching / conversion to meat, milk, and fiber. In the beginning school, we started, on day one, first session, with this premise, that there's only 4 necessary ingredients to making meat, milk, and fiber. It's carbon dioxide, sunlight, water, and soil minerals. Those are what we would call natural resources. They're not manufactured. We don't buy them per se, but with the the solar panel there, solar energy, we always make the point that solar energy is free, but our solar collector, the land itself, is not free. So what we're really, the type of agriculture that I'm involved with and the ranching approach that we work with is managing ecosystem processes, or working with natural ecosystem processes rather than being reliant on purchased input, diesel fuel over which we have no control, the cost of equipment over which we have no control. What we focus on is managing the things that we can manage and control, and that's solar energy flow, water cycle, mineral cycle, and biodiversity. So that brings us to, well, what in all of these things is really driving the profit of our business? And there's a number of different, factors that we might consider. And when you're with a group of fellow producers, these are some of the things, they get bandied about. If weaning weights, labor costs, investment, operating, calf price, feed costs, weaning percent, cow size. All of these are things that we think might be affecting profitability. And so these are the things that, we weigh in and consider. And through the course of this morning, we're going to sort through a lot of these factors and see how they really stack up and what does make a difference to the bottom line in a ranching or grass farming operation. Profit is our motivation. For some people, it is the number one motivation of why they're in the business. For some people, the love of the lifestyle is actually a greater driving factor than the drive for profit. But I don't think anybody actually wants to lose a ton of money in their recreational ranching enterprise. So a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about are the same things that would be taught and talked about in Ranching for Profit schools. Has anyone here been through the Ranching for Profit program? 1, 2. I'm going to encourage everyone else in the room, if you're serious about being in this business and not just a hobby, not just a lifestyle consideration, go to a Ranching for Profit school. It's a week of your life, and it's a couple $1,000, but it's one of the best investments you will ever make in working towards being truly successful in the ranching business. I did Ranching for Profit class, I don't remember if it was the late 80s or very early 90s. And it obviously has shaped the way that I have thought about everything in the ranching business since that time. But if profit is your motivation, profit is a remarkably simple concept. It is your income minus your cost of production. Now, and what I'm talking about here, we're going to spend the first probably 30, 40 minutes talking about what are really just basic business principles. They're not unique to farming or ranching. These are broad concepts of business management. So if you want to increase profit, you have a couple options. You increase income and or you reduce costs. These are the basic avenues of increasing the revenue stream. You add units of production, run more cows. Now, if you are losing $150 on every cow that you own today, do you think it makes sense to get 50 more of them? Probably not. Probably not. If you are making $150 in every cow that you have today, would it make sense to add more? Yes, it does, unless you have to add additional costs. Maybe adding those 50 more cows is the break point between you doing everything yourself and having to hire someone. So those 50 cows not only cost you the price of 50 cows, they cost you the salary of another employee. Or do you have to lease more land? And leases are really expensive in your area. Or do you have to do this? Or do you have to do that? Adding, even if you're making money on every cow right now, adding 50 more cows may or may not mean that you actually are improving your profit margin. That's why we have to know about the cost. Receive a higher price per unit. This is marketing rather than just selling. It is creating value-added products rather than selling a commodity product. When I started in this grazing, research and education and practicing business in the 1980s, there were basically no premiums in the cattle business. There were discounts for bad eyes, bad feet, bad udders, bad disposition, bad horns. And so the thing you primarily tried to do was create cattle or sheep, whatever livestock it was, that was not susceptible to being discounted. Now there are premiums throughout the business. Even if you are just producing commodity beef, there are opportunities for adding to your paycheck by source verification, certain breed programs. The most successful marketing program in the whole beef industry is what? Certified Angus beef. Certified Angus beef. Is it real? Yeah, about this much of it is real. How much of it is hype? About this much of it. But damn, they are good marketers. And so, if you're just strictly selling your cow-calf, you're selling calves at weaning, but if they are black Angus, there's that bit of a premium there. And so we can get a higher price per unit. And then the third avenue is diversification, adding enterprises. If you're strictly in the cow-calf business, why don't you add a stocker program? If you're in a cow-calf business on a property that is overrun with brush, why don't you add a goat enterprise? If you're selling grass-fed beef and every time you're at the farmer's market somebody asks, hey, do you have grass-fed lamb as well? Maybe you should add a sheep enterprise. What about if you want to get away from using insecticides, pour on insecticides and dewormers on your cattle, and you don't want to use any of those pharmaceuticals? How are you going to control the parasites? Adding a layer operation, free-range layers, great for cleaning up all the parasites in a pasture. So those are ways that we can increase our revenue stream. And then on the other side of the equation, we have reducing costs. We have two categories of costs. Traditional economists, they talk about fixed costs and variable costs. Well, operating costs are what we would consider the variable costs. These are costs that change as you increase the units of production. I learned in ranching for profit long time ago not to say fixed costs, because those costs are not fixed. If you change the business model, you can make some of those go away. We talk about overheads. Overheads are the cost of being in business, and we'll go through this in a little more detail here. But we need to be aware that we have a couple different layers of costs. And for people who buy a ranch kind of recreationally and then end up saying, I decided I kind of like running cattle, but you decide a little too late after you have built a fancy barn and you've overinvested in this and you've overinvested in that and you've created a ton of overheads on that property that are more overheads than your carrying capacity can support. So very many situations I see hidden overheads or unrecognized overheads as being what sinks the business. I take cost accounting very seriously. Again, if you are in the business, you need to have an accounting system that's a little more advanced than, scratching down or I'll say just your check ledger. Yeah, your check ledger tells you how much money you've paid out. How many people use checks? There are people who no longer use checks. Out of our personal checking account, I'm not sure we write 10 checks a year. So there's all kinds of accounting opportunities out there. We've been using QuickBooks for a number of years, and it does the job. Once you know how to work within it, you can create different enterprises. You can allocate, from a single credit card payment, you can allocate those charges to different enterprises. So I think you have to have some kind of more sophisticated accounting program than just your checkbook, and that allows you to track costs more accurately and to allocate costs to enterprises as they need to be. And to me, that's very important, because as we go through this, we're going to talk about identifying where your profit centers are, what is causing you your losses, and you can really only figure that out if you have accurate and consistent accounting.